A Trip into the Darkness. Prologue. An entry from Mallory's journal. Crazed. Love me through your hatred and tell me that you need me, then turn around and knock me down on the cold hard ground. Tell me that I'm crazy, but is it I who is insane, when you're the one driving the loony train? You want to take a drill bit to my brain, hollow out the goo that makes me me and not you. You are off your fucking rocker and you're a deranged stalker. Always following me around, trying not to make a sound. Cut me if you want, you can feel my fucking cunt. The more pain I'm in, the more it will feel like a win. Chapter 1. Mallory made it back to her apartment at exactly 5:19 p.m. She would have loved to run longer, but there simply was no time today. She had her virtual poetry class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, starting at 5:30 at night and ending at 9:30. It was a long class, but at least it was interesting. This semester, she had Poetries of the Greats, which was virtual, and another English course that was completely online. This was her first semester at Ohio University, where she was working on her master's in literature. Her older brother Lance loved to tease her that a degree in English was a dead-end road unless she wanted to become a middle school teacher and have chairs thrown at her all day. To which she would state that majoring in literature, not English, would open her doors to becoming a college professor or her dream career, a best-selling author. Not everyone wanted to be a successful car salesman like him. This fact baffled Lance. Sitting down at her kitchen table in front of her laptop, Mallory logged into her online class. The next 4 hours dragged by painfully slow. By the end of class, Mallory could barely keep her eyes open. Yawning, she turned off her laptop and continued to sit there. She felt like she could fall asleep with her eyes open. I just had to go be an overachiever, didn't I? She mumbled to herself, thinking about the ton of assignments that were now due before the meeting of class next week. At least she had Mondays and Tuesdays off from Marcy's pub and diner, where she worked full-time in the mornings as a waitress. During those 2 days off, she would be busy trying to catch up and get ahead in her classes. All the assignments and required readings would make those days off feel like she was a high-pressure job. It's fine, Mal. In less than 2 years, this will all be behind me. That's nothing, really. Mallory tried priding herself on being optimistic as she stood up from her kitchen table. She would have loved to go to bed just then, but a shower was called for. The long day at the diner and the run had gotten her all sweaty and musty. She was certain that her hair smelled like grease, thanks to the kitchen at work. She quickly stripped down, letting her clothes land where they wanted, before making her way to the shower. While soaping her hair, Mallory contemplated the best day to clean her little apartment. Her laundry basket was starting to overflow, and there was clutter everywhere. She decided then that what she really needed was good sex and not a clean apartment. Perhaps she would find a guy Saturday night to entertain her for a few hours after work, and then they could go to his apartment. This would mean she would not have to worry about picking anything up this weekend. It was perfect. Laying down in bed, she ran through the list of guys she had already hooked up with and had not yet blocked. The list was short because most guys were not smart enough to believe her when she told them she only wanted sex and nothing else. Mallory always made it a point to inform her lovers that she was only looking for a fling that transpired on her terms only. Some guys agreed to this, only to get obsessed, which was unfortunate for them. It seemed like every guy she hooked up with wanted more from her. She didn't have the time or the mental health to even entertain the idea of a committed relationship. Tina from work had informed Mallory that she believed her problem with relationships stemmed from attachment issues brought on by her mother. Her mom had spent all her childhood freaking out about life instead of giving her children the love and attention they needed and deserved. Mallory had regretted sharing information about her past and her relationships with men with Tina. She did not think she had attachment issues. Her problem was simple. She had never found a guy worth sticking around for. After she had sex with someone, she would find herself disconnected. Ever since her mother died, leaving her on her own, her life had been too busy to look for anything serious or committing. There was also the fact that scouting out a new guy and getting him under her was as exhilarating as having sex with him. There was just something about the chase that she loved. Tilda. 7 a.m., and yet again the obnoxious sound of Morning Flower Melody started blaring away, stealing Mallory from her peaceful sleep. Was it normal for people to wake up naturally angry? Fucking useless alarm clock, fucking me over again, she mumbled as she turned it off and swung her legs over the side of the bed. Rubbing her temples, she wished she had a strong drink. Alcohol and good sex would help heal her mental exhaustion. Well, maybe not heal it, but it would be a great distraction from her life. Losing herself and forgetting about her responsibilities for a night sounded splendid. 2 more days and she would get that release. Would she ever have a free day just to sleep and relax? Her life felt like a constant parade of big events that she had to keep completing in order to hopefully achieve an acceptable life for herself. Work, school, study, run, sleep, repeat. Throwing her legs over the side of the bed, Mallory got up and gave her body a quick stretch. She made her way into the small kitchen area of her studio apartment, pressed brew on her coffee pot, and got in the shower to chase away her grogginess. Mallory had always loved writing, but working full-time at the diner, along with multiple classes every week, was killing her drive and inspiration to write. She really should have gone part-time this semester and maybe every semester after, but she was itching to get ahead and get her schooling behind her. She was ready to have more for herself. Within the next 29 minutes, she was showered, dressed, had her coffee and apple in hand, and was out the door to start another day. Early summer in Ohio was always hot and humid. Mallory was never able to understand how it could be this humid in the middle of the Midwest. But hey, she wasn't a science major for a reason. Toledo was a bustling city, and no matter the time of day, there was always seemed to be people driving around and parading on the streets. She would have loved to own a car, but until she made it through school and got a high-paying job as a professor, she was damned to walk everywhere. Jogging across the intersection, Mallory arrived at Marcy's with a couple of minutes to spare. Marcy's was a classy place, with dark wooden floors, forest-green walls, and white trim. The bar was made from slightly lighter wood and well-polished. The old but pristine jukebox in the corner played classic hits all day long, and the patio out back was perfect for smokers. Using her key, she opened the door and locked it behind herself. She turned towards the back to toss her half-eaten apple in the trash and stashed her coffee cup behind the bar counter. After logging into the computer to get clocked in, she made her way over to the coffee pots to get them started along with the tea. "Morning, Mallory. You have a good night?" Tina, an older plump lady with bright red hair, asked as she made her way over, carrying a tray of silverware. "Morning, Tina. And yeah, it was okay. Just tried to catch up on a few things. You know how it goes." Mallory smiled at the lead waitress, who nodded as she set the silverware down and turned on the conventional toaster. "Yeah, I probably should have done the same, but instead I found myself holed up with a nice bottle of wine and a fat doobie for the evening," Tina stated, and Mallory laughed at her response. She liked Tina and her easygoing personality. They had been working the morning shift together for a couple of years now. "I wish I were that lucky," Mallory replied, as she headed to the front door to flip the sign and unlock the deadbolt. As she did, she could already see an older man getting out of his car from in front of the building. A middle-aged gentleman from across the street was also exiting his vehicle to head that way. Good old morning regulars making their way in for their morning coffee, breakfast, and gossip. She knew that in a matter of 20 or 30 minutes the diner would be full of customers, and Danny, their morning cook, would be swamped with breakfast orders. Morning rush was followed by a 30-minute lunch break. Picking up her lunch from the kitchen, she made sure to tease Danny about the Cleveland Giants' loss from the night before, telling him that the team was on a downhill spiral. She couldn't care less about baseball, but a couple of the regulars were talking about the game during their morning coffee, and she liked to stay up to date with what was going on in the world. Finishing her shift, Mallory made her way back home, where she changed and went for a run. Jogging behind her apartment building and through a section of trees, she quickly made her way on to the University of Toledo's campus. She had attended this college to receive her bachelor's in English. This school was the main reason she had the studio apartment she lives in now. After graduation in early May, she had seen no reason to try and move. Sure, her apartment was small and old, but the rent was cheap and the place was close to where she worked. She had loved this college. The campus was huge, and the concrete trails leading to all the different buildings were wider than any sidewalk. Plus, it was secluded from the rest of the world, which made her feel safe. During winter months, when the days were shorter, the street lights would light up her path. Even late at night, when she was the only person on the trails, she had lights shining on the path and cameras pointing at her from the different buildings. Weaving around students heading to and from classes, she felt free. When she was home again, she showered and sat down to work on her writing assignments for the rest of the night. Tilda. Saturday was a blur. She breezed through work and was off at her normal time. Instead of leaving after her shift, she took off her apron, unbuttoned the top of her shirt, and sat down at the bar to order a beer off tap. Draft beer was by far her favorite. It was flavorful and crisp. The shit they packed in the bottles and cans couldn't hold a light to a local pale ale draft. That was another thing she liked about Marcy's Diner and Pub. The owners always made sure to keep a wide range of drafts on tap. Not only did they support local breweries, but they kept a wide selection. With her beer in hand, Mallory went to the patio to drink it peacefully while enjoying the afternoon sun. Picking a seat in the corner, she sat at a table and pulled out her phone. Going through her college book app, she was determined to get caught up on her weekly reading. It was nice having all her required books downloaded on her phone and at her fingertips. She did miss the feeling of having an actual textbook in hand, but the virtual way was cheaper and more convenient. Besides, when reading a total of 9 different books for 2 different classes, it was much more logical to have them all in one spot. She could read from one for a while before switching to the next to continue her studies. She had 2 quizzes tomorrow in this week's reading, one for English and one for poetry. Starting in on her first book, it was no time at all until her beer was gone. Sammy, one of the evening servers, came up and asked if she needed anything. Looking up, Mallory smiled and asked for another beer. On her 4th draft, she was feeling really good and in need of nicotine. Sitting her phone on the table, she surveyed the patio. It was still bright outside, and the area was starting to fill up with customers. There were 12 tables on the concrete patio, and only about half of those tables were filled at the moment. 3 tables were occupied by couples, while the others had a few stragglers only outside to smoke, and one with a small dinner party. A group of guys standing close to the railing, smoking cigarettes, drinking, and laughing piqued her interest. If Mallory had to guess, she would say they were car salesmen or something of that nature. They were all relatively young, very well dressed, and clean-shaven. There was just something about car salesmen that screamed arrogance, which this group of guys certainly had. One guy in particular caught her attention. He was wearing a white shirt with the top few buttons undone and dark blue, well-fitted dress pants that fell just above his ankles. His shoes were light leather brown loafers. His blonde hair was shaggy on top and trimmed close on the sides. He had no beard to speak of, as if he had just shaven. Mallory was willing to bet money that he had light blue eyes to match. At that moment, Mr. Blue Pants and White Shirt took a hit off his vape and looked back at her. Sure enough, there came the blue eyes. Mallory gave him a small smile and raised her half-empty beer at him. The boy smiled back before raising his own glass to her. Then he turned his attention towards his fellow companions again. Not even a full minute had passed when he touched the guy closest to him and said something before turning to walk her way. She had to give it to him. His stride was confident as he made his way over to her table. Once he was there, he assertively pulled out a seat opposite hers to sit down. "How's it going?" he asked, sitting his drink in front of him. Mallory smiled and said, "Might be better now that you're here." "Is that so?" He seemed tickled by the response. "Oh, yeah. It was getting lonely out here," Mallory stated, taking another drink from her now almost empty beer. He nodded before reaching for his vape. "What are you smoking?" she asked, nodding her head towards his hand. "It's just nicotine. I'm Quincy, by the way." Quincy held out his vape to her in an offering. Taking the plastic cylinder from his hand, she took a few puffs before she answered. "I'm Mallory. It's nice to meet you." "So, Mr. Quincy, are you a car salesman?" He snorted and said, "Well, yeah, actually I am. Been selling cars at Brondale's Ford for almost a year now. Why? Are you in the market?" "Not at the moment, but I'll keep you in mind when I am," Mallory answered, giving him a cocky smile. Sammy decided to make her way over to their table, asking if they needed another round. Mallory nodded and asked for a double vodka with her next beer, while Quincy requested a Jack and Coke. "That's a player's drink," she thought as Sammy walked away to retrieve their order. "So, Mallory, why are you drinking all by yourself on a Saturday night?" "Well, I work here, and after the week I had, I decided I needed a drink to take the edge off." Quincy nodded, and she could tell he was trying to come up with something else to ask her. The back and forth between her and a new guy was always entertaining. She knew what Quincy desired, and she could feel the sexual energy sizzling between them. She could tell he wanted to impress her, but he was afraid of being too forward. His body language was awkward as he shifted in his seat. She liked it when guys squirmed. It made her feel powerful. "Working at a bar. I'm sure that's entertaining," Quincy said, taking a hit off his vape. He was having a hard time maintaining eye contact. She was willing to bet he was inexperienced at picking girls up from the bar. That could be a bad thing when it comes to the bedroom. At this point in the conversation, Mallory was on the fence if she wanted to go home with this guy. That was, if he even had a home to go back to. Some guys his age still lived with their parents and were afraid to take girls home. Then again, she could just take him back to her place. Even with the clutter, it's not like he'd be sticking around long enough to have a problem with the mess. It has its perks working at a bar, I can promise you that. Giving her a coy smile, he handed his vape back to her again. At least he was in tune with that. When Sammy made it back to their table with the drinks, Mallory was happily surprised to find her carrying 2 double vodkas. "Thanks, Sammy," Mallory said, reaching for her shot and sliding the extra one to Quincy. "Fuck, girl, you trying to kill me?" Quincy asked, picking up his shot. "Nope, just trying to see if you're capable of keeping up," Mallory said, bringing hers to her lips to shoot. "Sweetheart, I can assure you that I'm able to keep up," Quincy said, looking her in the eyes. It was at that moment Mallory decided she didn't care whose house they went back to. She was fucking this guy tonight.